Hey Edmonton, thanks for joining us here again on another installment of our stuff here at yegnation.com. Thanks for joining us. Today we have Mr. Troy Pavlek here from his ward. Troy, thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about the area you chose and a little bit about yourself and your ward.
So I'm Troy, I'm running for Ward 11. I chose here Ritchie Market because this exemplifies what I want to do on City Council to liven up our neighborhoods. So Ritchie Market, it was built through the Neighborhood Corner Store program from the City of Edmonton, and basically what that was is grant funding for businesses in the City of Edmonton to spice up their businesses. We have facade on the K&K building, and we had the new Ritchie Market built. This lot before, just a couple years ago, we would be standing on an ugly gravel pit with a small little shack with Stamp-a-Doodle written on it. It was a blight on the neighborhood. Quaint, but a blight, and now we have one of the highest in demand neighborhood pubs in the city, and that's just a small investment from the city to start this, and we get such we get such incredible gains from it, and those are the kind of initiatives that I'd like to pursue.
That's very cool. So this is your first run in City Council, if I'm correct?
Yeah, this is my first run at City Council.
Awesome. So why did you choose to run?
So it's a whole combination of things. I'm a software developer by trade, so it's not as if I'm aiming to be a career politician here. I saw a few issues with the city that I really wanted to rectify. The chief one for me is the Vision Zero program. In 2015, the city adopted the Vision Zero as our traffic safety strategy, and since then we have done nothing with it and have only paid lip service to the program. I want to embody true Vision Zero at the City of Edmonton and implement it as the Swedes who created the program intended it to be implemented.
Awesome. There's always a good thing. I mean, I used to work in the marketing business. You know, lip service to ROI is a big thing, right? So if you guys can understand that, it's a cool concept. I highly recommend looking up lip service to ROI. And it's cool that you have that kind of insight as a younger guy. You speak directly to our viewership in YEGnation as the young Edmonton community here. Tell us a little bit about how you, as a young Edmontonian, want to implement and talk a little bit differently than the politicians are currently.
Well, so one of the primary things I want to change, it's how we do business at the City of Edmonton, and I think we have city policy. C581, which is the open city policy, and it says that all city data should be open by default, and we're not really doing that. And what that means is when City Council makes a decision, when City Council has an action, when we gather data, that data is in the open data catalog, so anyone can use it, research it, remix it, citizens or journalists alike. And when you have openness by default, that means that you can't have corruption. The public becomes the opposition and makes sure everyone is being honest and makes sure everyone is doing what they say they're supposed to be doing. And if we can instill the culture of openness by default, it doesn't actually matter what I tell to you if I'm a trustworthy politician or not, because you will know for certain facts whether or not it's true.
That's awesome. I like the idea of the open data catalog as a young Edmontonian, because again, that's exactly right. It allows us to have accountability within our politicians and also accountability on us. If we're not looking into that information as the citizens of Edmonton, what are we here for?
And it's not even just about accountability. We have Beta City YEG. I love to give these guys a shout out. They're a great group of people. And what they do is they use the open data catalog, they use the open resource from the city, and it's a civic tech meetup. They build things like, for $20, it's about $80 now with some of the upgrades, they built a pedestrian counter, something that uses infrared and IR sensors to track how many pedestrians are crossing the road. And compare this to a standard city procurement where a pedestrian counter costs $1,200, $1,500 each. We can get so much more data and so much more valuable insight into the effects our policies are having by leveraging these motivated individuals who all happen to be young, go figure.
Interesting. It's weird that you might find that at our viewership with yegnation.com. Just a little tidbit there. But so tell us now why. So you've obviously chose to run for city council because you see a few things that you wanna change in your community. What things do you see that are going well with the community that you want to continue to help develop?
So we are making stellar progress, and I credit a lot of our progress to Don Iveson's incredible leadership. I tend to find that Don's vision is almost exactly what I want out of a perfect Edmonton, but I find our mayor has been hamstrung by a slightly uncooperative council that causes him to compromise on a few of his key platform issues. Transit, we could go so much further with transit, but we've been taking stepping stones because we don't want to increase the budget. We have to make sure transit operates within its existing allocated budget. But we know that a car-based Edmonton will not work in 50 years with our current sprawling strategy. It won't work. All the urban planning knowledge from across the world tells us that. So we need forward thinking, and we need investment in that forward thinking. Just the words, they're not enough anymore. And I'd like to be that voice on council.
Fair enough. Ward 11, how does Ward 11 differ than the other wards in the city? What do you see that are important issues in Ward 11 that may not translate the same in other wards?
So, it's a weird question. My challenger, I suppose I'm the challenger, my incumbent in the ward would like to spin Ward 11 as a suburban versus downtown ward, where our issues are different than the issues of those elitists downtown. I don't think that way at all. I think we're a single Edmonton. That said, there are a few specific ward issues. Ward 11 is interesting because the bulk of the Valley Line Phase 1 is running straight through Ward 11 and almost only through Ward 11. It runs a bit through Ward 8. So we have it's a disparate ward. The neighborhoods we're in right now in the north end of the city, above the industrial area, they have fairly different concerns than the areas south of the city. Our neighborhoods we're in right now, they're post-war neighborhoods built in the 40s, 50s, and we're dealing with a lot of, our neighborhoods are starting to die off. People need to age in place, we're having families move out and houses becoming vacant, and we need the revitalization and infill, and we need to reinvigorate these communities. Millwoods, it's in a sort of different set of problems. It was built mostly in the 70s and 80s, and their problem is they're maturing, they're urbanizing. Millwoods Town Center is going to be the new downtown, and with the Valley Line, that is only going to get more intense. So while we're already sort of the urban core up here and we just need to densify and infill, down in Millwoods, they're dealing with the maturing of their neighborhoods in a different way, and an equally important way. But I think those sorts of growing up of neighborhoods, those are the main issues of Ward 11.
Awesome. So the last thing that I really want to touch on, and it's kind of the values of YEGnation. I'd love to get a little bit of your insight on that here. We're all about getting power to the younger Edmontonians here and making sure that they get out and have their voice recognized in the community, which is why we started YEGnation and why we like to communicate with younger candidates, especially like yourself, like Alex McFarland, 18 years old. Like that's cool, right? We like seeing things like that, and also with gender diversity and cultural diversity here. How do you see that Ward 11 fits the bill in City Council, and how do you feel you'll really that represent?
So you mentioned gender and culture diversity. I say this as, a straight white guy. It's tough for me. I'm running against female candidates in this ward, so excuse me while I put on the political doublespeak face. I think it's incredibly important to have women and gender minorities and cultural minorities represented on council, because that's the point of a council. If it doesn't represent its constituents, then what's the point? That said, I do represent somewhat minority, given that, I'm half the average age of City Council. There is an age diversity thing there too, and that needs to be represented. That said, I am running against two women, and it would be disingenuous to say, hey, vote for women, except in my ward. So it's hard for me to grapple with this situation. I say, we are doing very well this election. Half the candidates, at least a few weeks ago, were women. So, when we talk about what Equal Voice and Alberta For Her have tried to do, we tried to get more women to run. We've done it. That's great. And now I say, when people go to the polling booth, choose the best candidate. And God willing, we're going to get more than one woman on council. And if it's a woman from my ward, I'll be happy to write to her as my city councillor and advocate for the issues as I'm doing right now.
That's awesome, and that's what YEGnation is here for. Again, it's what the biggest thing that I like to make sure that we make a point of is, especially with incumbents, having a pretty good viewer winning rate over the past, as well as fundraising. We want to make sure that people in Edmonton know what's going on in their city and are talking about the councillors and the candidates that are running, so that we all know what's actually going on before people end up in the office.
You mentioned the incumbent advantage, and I'd be remiss if I didn't sneak this dig in. If you look back at City of Edmonton election history, the incumbent, when they choose to run, almost never loses. As far as you can look back, when the incumbent decides to run, they win. Except once. There was an incumbent councillor who lost to Don Iveson, and that was Mike Nickel, my opponent. So I'm running up against the only one who's ever lost in recent memory. So
fair enough. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us today, Troy. It's a pleasure to have you. Pleasure talking with you here. Again, we like seeing people come out and you know, actually be a direct representative of our people here at YEGnation. So guys, do not forget to vote Monday, October 16th. Go out and find out a little bit more about Troy. Troy, feel free to plug your website and where your information is held.
I work for an SEO company by day. Google Troy Pavlek, you'll find me.
Awesome. And thanks for joining us here today on YEGnation.